Welcome to podcast number 7. In this podcast, we have Tim Crockett, who, as you will learn, is pretty extraordinary. He's an ex-Royal Marine King's Badgeman, ex-Special Boat Service. He was sent to retrieve tapes of Osama Bin Laden. He smuggled journalists into Homs in the peak of the Syrian troubles, and he's now training to row 3,000 miles across the Atlantic, solo and unsupported, to raise money and awareness for veterans with PTSD, all of which we cover in this podcast, as well as Tim's background, how he's got to where he is, and his view on success and other areas. This podcast is a bit different to the others. It's the first one I haven't recorded in person due to the fact that Tim lives in Atlanta. It was a bit glitchy at times because the weather was closing in on Tim, but you should be able to make everything out, and if there's anything that we missed, I've added it in. So stick with it. It's very interesting, and I hope you can take something from it. Right, Tim, thanks for coming on. I want to start off with your background. So go as far back as you like. How have you come to be where you are now?
Not a problem. And again, thanks, Jack, for inviting me on. So a little bit more about me. Obviously, now I live in the United States, and I've been here since like sort of 2002, 2003. But what brought me here is really the story, and I know I've shared a lot of this with you, given our history. So I'm Hereford born and bred. Grew up on the south side of Hereford. My grandfather started a coach and travel business that my father and my brother still are active in today, so the family business. Always been involved with travel, and from a very early age, obviously I got that itch, and grew up in Hereford like any other kid. Bounced around, played a lot of rugby, and it was sort of those latter teenage years. I always knew that I was going to join the military. I didn't know what or really what I was going to do. I just knew that I wanted to be in the military. My brother and my father had both been in the military for a short period of time, both in infantry. My father went on into the sort of logistics side of things. My brother was just infantry. So that was kind of what I aspired to. But I also knew that what happened if the military didn't quite suit me. So I first went into an engineering apprenticeship there in Hereford, and ended up working at Denko's. And I was destined to become a design draftsman. So I was keen on making things and being very sort of precise. Was kind of bordering on OCD to some extent. So that was my world. But the pace of progressing through that apprenticeship and ultimately getting to my own drawing table or CAD system was a bit slow for me. And I couldn't shake the need to go off and do something more adventurous. So I decided to leave my apprenticeship after 2.5 years and start my journey into the military. And it was around about that time, and I tell this story because it's kind of, well, why did I end up in the Marines and ultimately in UK Special Forces? And it was because when I, at the time, was still in the apprenticeship, I was doing actually just some manual work. I was digging a trench. That was dirty. I had a shovel with me, and I ended up at the Army Careers Office, walked through, and they said I wanted to join the Army. And they looked at me and made an assumption that I perhaps wasn't the ideal candidate for them. And they asked a few questions. I answered them, and they went, "No, stick with what you're doing. You'd probably be better off." Which was not the sort of answer a young, thrusting, keen wannabe soldier wanted to hear. So I probably turned around, walked out, and went out a few drinks with a few friends, one of which was in the Marines. And he sort of explained to me the options, the career paths, again, all the good points, the fun. I said, that's for me. And there was actual a career path to become an assault engineer. So again, still satisfy my need to be precise, but also have the opportunity to blow stuff up as well. So I said, right, I'm going to be a Marine, and went over to Worcester, passed with flying colours the initial entry side of things, and headed down to Lympstone. It was a lengthy period, so it was still like just over a year before I turned up at Lympstone to become a young Marine recruit. But from that point forward, I loved it. I thrived. Most people say that they don't enjoy training, and while I didn't necessarily love it, it was still an environment that I thrived in. Again, that OCD precise requirement of getting your bed block made and cleaning your boots and cleaning your equipment and rifle and all that sort of stuff just sat well with me, and I popped out the other end as the King's Badgeman, which is obviously a high award awarded to those that are worthy of the accolade, because I did what I was told, and I popped out a product of the system, had every faith in it, and threw myself into it. Any little setback, you learn by it and pop out the other end. And I think that's what really set me up for where I ended up within UK Special Forces. These are tried and tested and proven paths that if you stick your head down, ass up, and put the work in, you will pop out the other end. But in order to be that sort of person, again, you have to fit a certain mold. So yeah, I came out of Lympstone, spent a period of time boxing, first for the Marines and then the Navy. And that was really sort of the time of the first Gulf War. So bouncing back and forth to Iraq, bouncing back and forth to HMS Nelson down in Portsmouth, kind of a little bit sort of turbulent just because of what was going on. But that then set the stage for an opportunity for me to, at a very early age, have a chance to go for Special Forces, ultimately the SPS, Special Boat Service. So with very little preparation, I was only been in the Marines about 2 years, and with 2 weeks preparation, turned up down at Poole to go through what they called sort of the acquaint, or the evaluation to even start selection, start the course, and not knowing what was going to come after day 3, because the person that I knew down on the course or was coming through the course with me had only ever made it to day 3 previously. So it was, again, trust the process, put the work in, and hopefully pop out the other end.
How did it compare to the Royal Marines training? Because obviously the Royal Marines training is quite brutal anyway, isn't it? Is it another level?
It is, yeah. So you've got 9 months worth of training when you're looking at joining the Marines. It's the longest infantry training or basic training in the world, but it's designed, again, to produce something at the end.
A huge dropout rate, isn't it?
They can be, and I think that's more, again, if we want to sort of open the conversation, that's probably more based on those that are joining, thinking that, oh, I can come out of this, I'm a fit lad, I run around. It does require a certain type of person, and that's not to say that there aren't injury and attrition along the way, but if you don't want to be there, then you won't end up there. It's more about what's between your ears, and it's the same if you then put that on any other unit. Not to say that the Marines are more tougher or better than any other unit, but they are. And that might annoy a few power friends of mine, but like I said, it's a tried and tested path. Walk the path, listen to what's being told of you, and put the required effort in, and you should pop out the other end, or barring injuries and so forth. So yes, it is tough, but it's then a different type of toughness. I was younger. more naive to some extent when I went into the Marines, but I came out the other end where I should have been. Then you join a unit, but like I said, I was bouncing around the place between boxing for the Corps and boxing for the Navy, going out on a Norway deployment and then a ski instructor's course, then going out to Iraq. So yeah, one example, I'm in Norway one day, I'm back in Taunton, Hereford the following day, and then the following day I'm in northern Iraq. So in the space of a week, you've gone from one climate to the other. You've gone from one country through several others to another. But that's what I loved, and that's why I joined. And that same opportunity and the same process is how I applied and went through SF selection. Like I said, I didn't know a great deal about it, which meant that my judgment wasn't colored in any way, and I probably wasn't going to second guess myself. I was confident in my skills and my training and what I was getting taught. I just had to apply it. And yes, I went through this time over 12 months worth of training and came out, passed as a young SC3. In fact, I was the third youngest to pass on record. The second youngest to pass actually was on my course with me. He was a couple of weeks younger than me, very good friend, sadly since gone. And in the 10, 15 years since passing that, I also then met the youngest Marine to have passed SF selection, or SPS selection, should I say. So yeah, it's a small world, and again, we have all gone through that same process, and I've learned different things along the way. And when you start talking about small units, strengths, and the things that sort of bring you in and make you thrive are perhaps already ingrained in you, and the training just brings it out. And then you got to realize, in order to really do well within that environment, you have to trust the people on either shoulder of yours, and like I said, do the job in hand.
Is it a common mindset between all the
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the differences between perhaps the unit I came from when I came from it, because again, things have changed since I've left, that you are 99% of the time all cut from the same cloth. So again, we've all come into the Marines, and then we've all come from the Marines into the SPS. So yes, you have the same sort of background, the same training, and the same sense of humor. And that's one of the qualities of the Marines, is having that sense of humor during those darkest moments. And that will pull you through on some occasions. And some people will see that humor perhaps as being a little bit twisted, and to some extent, and it can be. But yeah, it's part of having that same mindset and knowing that you can rely on the people that are with you.
So once you left the force, how long were you in Special Forces for?
So I was in just under 12 years, or I made that 12-year mark. Again, being a King's Badge, when you get seniority, so it kind of skews the actual calendar date from what is called your term of service. So I came out in March 2001. The reasons why I came out, obviously this is before the world went even crazier. I was young, I'd gone in, I'd progressed through my career and my seniority fairly quickly, but then hit that natural ceiling. I couldn't get promoted any higher at that point without serving more time, and that's because of a small unit, and to some extent the opportunities start to narrow as you go further up the ranks. At that time, obviously, things have changed now with the adoption of UKSF and the SF group and all these other bits and pieces that have become a requirement of the operational commitments. Because I was so young, and I'd had then 12 years and had a lot of good experiences and done a lot of different jobs, I felt that it was the right time to leave because I was young. I could have a second career, and throw myself into that second career. What that second career was, I didn't know at that time, because, again, this was pre 9/11. The opportunities to come out of special forces and go into a second career, you were either going to go and do something in like close protection, bodyguard work, or you were going to be security for some family or do something of that nature. The level that I came out with at the time, there weren't that many documented transferable skills. So I couldn't come out with a tech diploma in management, or I can say, okay, you've done this in the diving world, here's your civilian qualification. Wasn't the facility to make that happen, which I was fine with. I just wanted to come out and look at that second career. So I purposely gave myself 12 months to sample what was out there and see which was a better fit for me, because I knew I wasn't going to stand outside an elevator and sort of be a highly paid butler to some extent. Nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't going to fit for me. So over the course of 12 months, I did everything from counter-piracy work on board cable-laying vessels off the west coast of Africa and in the Malacca Straits, which was very close to what I did in the military. I did some close protection stuff. I looked after celebrities and high net worth individuals, did a lot of project management, but also did a little bit of work with the BBC and the media in and around London, as well as out in Brazil. So, and that was a lot of fun. Again, I worked with some great people. I just didn't realize at the time that was sort of setting me up for my future career and what brought me to the US and to Atlanta ultimately. So in the course of those 12 months, like I said, sampled everything and was sort of gravitating towards more project management. Yes, I love getting my hands dirty. Yes, I love to be sort of self-reliant and a little bit of a loner. But my strength was in organizing a team to deliver an end result for a highly complex problem. What title you would give that, I'm not sure, but that's where I would thrive. That's what I was good at. Obviously, 9/11 happened, and the project that I was due to work on, which was a demining operation on the Iran-Iraq border for a Japanese oil company, that just evaporated overnight. I then had to find another job, and I was about to head out to, in fact, I did head out to Indonesia for another oil and gas project. In fact, it was a gas project for an oil exploration company, and sat out in Jakarta waiting to get forward deployed to the project site when obviously the planes went in to start bombing Afghanistan. Outrage within the Muslim world, and Indonesia became a hotbed of activity, and it got sort of delayed, and then eventually when they started searching hotels for Americans to throw them out of the country, and then they attacked the American embassy, again the project was mothballed and everyone was sent home. So now I'm lost 2 jobs, wondering how I'm going to pay the mortgage, and I'm actually working in London at a classic tennis tournament looking after Pat Cash, amongst other tennis greats of the time. And a friend of mine knew that I'd done some work with the BBC, and he was on the phone talking to somebody and said, "Hey, you've done some work with the BBC and the media before." I went, "Yeah, I'll give this guy a call. He's looking for someone to look after some journalists." I don't know, sign me up. So I went to that guy the following week. 10 days later, I'm in Afghanistan. So it was a very quick progression. I think I had a job interview, and they said, "How quickly can you start?" And I went, "Well, I'm working tomorrow, but I'm free after that." And that was pretty much where I then entered into the next phase of my sort of career, and that was what you could class as sort of security risk management, or I was a security risk specialist. And again, it was taking that skill set and element of being able to create solutions in highly complex situations and keep people safe. That ended with me being in Afghanistan, looking after a bunch of journalists, and as they were covering the ongoing sort of conflict and the transition phase after conflict in Afghanistan. I'm out there in Afghanistan, and after about 7 or so weeks of being out there, I'm normal sort of day, closing out the house accounts. That was one of the jobs that I had in Kabul. And the correspondent, who's a senior correspondent for CNN at the time, still is, and the producer walk into my room and close the door and lock it. And I thought, that doesn't look too good. But basically, they proposed something to me and asked if I would be willing to help them get some footage. And this in itself would probably last a whole hour story, so I'll keep it short here. But I was responsible for recovering what was Osama Bin Laden's video library, and then responsible in getting that and bringing it to Atlanta. That material went on in CNN a number of awards, and this footage is still used today in various different forms.
Is that a risky operation?
It could have been, and like I said, long story short, it would have been stretched out over a course of 3 weeks, if not 12 months, to wrap up the whole story. But the initial piece, yes, at the time, the road down to Kandahar wasn't great, but you could still drive it. And I say drive it, it's still a 16-hour drive across the southern sort of desert plains, and anything could happen along that route. Kandahar still had elements of unsavory people, Taliban and so forth. But it was during that period where the fall of the Taliban had happened, but the rise of the insurgency and all the roadside bombs hadn't happened as yet. So it was in that period of time where it was still safe to drive around and you weren't necessarily targeted in that sense. But this was shortly after Daniel Pearl and that situation. And that was our biggest fear, is that this was a setup of some sort that was going to try and draw in another Western journalist to be kidnapped, and who knows what might have happened. So instead of that, they offered me up, and that's where and that's where we sort of made that assessment. Is this something we want to do? How can we do it? And that's where I came into play. So yes, there was an element of risk, but it was not stupid risk. And at the end, we got what we needed. And that's really how I ended up in Atlanta. The very first time was carrying about 160 some odd VHS tapes hidden about my person and bags and luggage. And that went on to obviously say to be quite a big deal for CNN at the time. It still is. And I think that was a fairly big deal for me when you look back and reflect on it. But it brought me to Atlanta. It exposed me to the senior leadership within that organization. And then as they started to look at how they were going to cover Gulf War II, the question was raised, perhaps we need to second someone to the organization from the company I was working for at the time, and help sort of train and coordinate all of the media assets at that time. So yeah, I was asked, and I came to Atlanta initially for a 3 to 6 months secondment. Ended up staying here 2.5 years. Met my wife, and after a short spell back in the UK, came back and moved here lock, stock and barrel in 2006. So over now, the last 15 years or so, Atlanta has been my home. And even though I've changed jobs and had my own company along the way, I've always sort of stayed within that type of work, whether it's looking after journalists in kind of frontline locations, whether that's conflict journalism or war zones, disaster areas, kind of remote locations, the training of the same, and then now anyone that sort of travels, whether that's business or again, humanitarian groups and so forth. So I've used the same skill set, the same approach, and really, when you look at a type of individuals, journalists, when something bad happens, most people will run away from trouble. That's what we do. But that as a profession, you have to run towards danger, very much like other first responders, whether that's fire, EMS, soldiers, police, in order to do your job. And like you said, there's a high risk component to that, and I was very good at keeping those people safe. So when you look at other businesses and other people that travel, it should be by definition a lot easier.
Do you get scared? I know you do it anyway, but do you ever think, what am I doing here?
There are moments. Like I said, I'm not a thrill seeker. I'm not a junkie, adrenaline junkie on that sense. But that's part of my makeup. I'm attracted to those sort of situations, not because I want to scare myself or the thrill of the chase, the ride, the getting shot at, that sort of stuff. That's not me. I get a kick out of solving those complex questions. You may even think I'd be a good person with puzzles and stuff. I'm not. I like to try and make some sort of order out of chaos. And if you were to ask Jennifer, my wife, the jobs and my career that I've had along the way, I've not slotted into kind of that run-of-the-mill easy organization that, I go to work at 9 a.m, I come home at 5, and then I have a restful weekend and evening. I bounce around like a pinball machine to some extent, getting very frustrated with either clients, customers, people that I work with, because things are not quite as they should be. And maybe I seek those situations out and then get frustrated because I'm in the middle of it all. But then when I fix something or solve a problem or contribute to a team that then gets it done, that's where I get my satisfaction. And if that's in a war zone in Syria, or if that's in a post-earthquake disaster zone, then that's me. And yes, the fear comes into it, but it's part of the job as well. And it's a case of, okay, you get it surprised a little bit, and yes, that might scare you. But my job is to try and eliminate or manage as much of that predictable risk or danger or fear or whatever it is. That's the reason I'm there. If I get scared, then I've not done my job well enough. And I think that's where it is. And when people have said to me, were you scared? I know you wanted to bring it up at some point. Were you scared when you were in halves in Syria during that period of time? There were times when you sort of look left and right and think, ooh, is this now going to be that moment? But I think I was too busy with doing my job, because I'm responsible for 2-3 other different people with me, that it perhaps wasn't until after the fact that you thought, well, that was a little bit close for comfort. But never did I feel that things had gotten out of my control. There were a few times that we walked right up to that line, but not to the point where, okay, oh shit, I've overstepped my capabilities here.
So just to clarify for those that are listening, in Syria, it was a program for CNN called 72 Hours Under Fire, wasn't it? So you took a team in, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the product of our time there. It was a news gathering assignment, and
At
the
the peak of the
assignment was to
troubles.
go in and sort of So there was a siege in and around a suburb of Homs. So Homs is a city in Syria, and Baba Amma was a suburb within that city, and it was kind of, some say, the start of the uprising against the Syrian government, and it was, I mean, decimated, and still is today. So we went in there basically to tell the story of what was going on, because the world wasn't really aware. And it was a long and convoluted route in. We snuck into the country. We snuck into Homs and then into Baba Amma through walking miles in underground sewage tunnels or drainage tunnels. And then, yes, got bombarded every day. Not quite all day, but I've never been on the receiving end of so much ordnance in my career, in my life, and that's quite a sobering thing to wake up to, because we got in there obviously during the night. That first morning, a little bit before 7 o'clock in the morning, and we'd arrived maybe 3 hours before that. The skies just lit up with rockets and artillery shells and mortars, and there's explosions going on all around you. All of a sudden, that's one of those moments when you think, should I get scared? And there probably was a rising fear at that point. But then my training and what I do for my job sort of kicked in, because, as an example, we'd been given the option to have a room up on the first floor, which was cleaner and a little bit more spacious. And as we walked in and the sun was coming up, and I did a quick evaluation of what was around us, I quickly made the decision, no, we're going to be in this corner on the bottom floor, because there was more building around us. Not just the building we were in, but the buildings across the street and so forth. So should a rocket, an artillery shell, something land on the building or in front of the building, that was our safest place. And it didn't take long before the first rocket did hit the building. It was a 120 millimeter rocket that slammed into the side of the building, where our heads would have been had we chosen to sleep on the floor above us.
Good call from you.
I've got pictures of this big 6 foot by 5 foot gaping hole in the concrete where the rocket struck. And we were sleeping we were downstairs when these things happened. And it's one of those moments that you sort of think, well, that was a good call.
Yeah, very, very.
But yeah, and then sadly, when we left, it was less than 10 hours that a mortar shell did hit literally in front of the doorway, when someone that I had helped take out a few hours before was killed along with another journalist, and it was wrong place at the wrong time, purely because that's the nature of the business to some extent.
That's very sad. So, you've obviously had quite a successful career after leaving the forces, but others don't. And I know you're now doing a pretty impressive feat you're training for, isn't it? 3,000 mile solo row to raise money for veterans with PTSD. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's quite the leap to go from running around in Syria and getting bombed by the Syrian army to where I am sort of today, and this chosen challenge. So for the listeners that probably do know but don't know my take on it all. So yes, 12 years in the military. I've stayed close. I've gone back and attended reunions whenever I can, stayed in contact with my old military buddies. And again, the advent of social media helps all that. Now living in the United States, and obviously this sense of patriotic sort of pride and veteran service and so forth is it's warming. And like I said, it's nice to know the support that is around. Going back 2 years or so ago now, the what became that 22 push-up challenge was a statistic that come out of the Veterans Association over here that 22 former military veterans were taking their own lives daily. And again, you can slice those numbers up differently depending on who you speak to, whether they go up and down and so forth. I'm not a statistician, but I got roped into that whole 22 push-ups for 22 days and then film it and nominate a friend online, just like a lot of these other viral videos. It was around about that time when I'd reconnected with an old Marine buddy of mine. We were on the boxing squad together, we were at 40 Commander together, and somehow we reconnected on Facebook and swapping some old stories and chatting through things and looking at pictures and so forth. And it was about 6 weeks later that I learned that he had taken his own life, and he had been suffering from PTSD pretty bad. I didn't know. Like I said, I wasn't close to him. We hadn't really spoken for 20 plus years, so it wasn't someone that I grew up with or knew intimately. But for some reason, and more so than what was happening online and the stuff in the news, it made more of a mark on me. And it was one of those itches that you just...
Oh, I think I may have lost you, Tim. Right, so we lost connection there. But so we were saying, more so than seeing it online, that the death of your friend or the veteran.
Yes. So, like I said, we weren't particularly close. Like I said, we had only just reconnected after many years, and yes, there was a lot of stuff in the news at the time, and people commenting on those that were taking their own lives, and not just in the United States, back in the UK and probably a number of other countries as well. So, felt like I wanted to do more. So, me and a couple of friends from CNN were looking to do a bigger production, and like I said, this brought a friend of mine doing push-ups in the Georgia Aquarium with the sea lions. We were bringing in drones. We were going to be speaking to service members, family members of those that had lost people, and tried to sort of wrap it up in a more news type package to help get the message out. Well, the day that we had planned to do some significant filming with a lot of military folks from Dobbins Air Force Base, which is near here, there was a large weather event of some sort that happened in Atlanta. There was a big storm that came through, so we couldn't film. And then everyone got busy. I myself, but the rest of the guys, those that had offered their time to film this, the drone operators, all those folks had busy lives. So our opportunity to do that dissipated, but it still stuck with me, and I wanted to do more. I didn't know what. And then around about that same time, I had another friend who was part of a 6-person team that was rowing from mainland Europe to mainland South America for a world record, and it was for a UK children's charity. And again, they were all Marines, so natural to follow them. I knew someone on there, and we're tracking the little dot that came across the ocean. And I thought, that's really cool, like rowing the Atlantic in a rowing boat. And digging on the internet, as one does, I came across the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, which is this rowing race from La Gomera in the Canary Islands to Antigua. And it's an annual race. It's been going on 20 years now. It's now in its 21st year. I thought, sounds perfect. That's a big enough challenge for me to measure against what I feel is a huge challenge in dealing with mental health, especially within the veteran community, but at large. And we're not just talking PTSD, we're talking anxiety, we're talking the effects of traumatic brain injury, depression, all the sort of feelings of alienation that a lot of people experience when they try to transition out of a close-knit unit like the military. Doesn't matter what branch or what unit. Working very closely in high stress situations forms bonds that a lot of people don't understand, and then you see stuff that obviously sticks with you. Or you see a lot of it or a little of it. Again, depending on your background, it will stick with you, and it can be fairly debilitating. So that's what I wanted to tackle. I've now found my challenge, rowing 3,000 miles across the Atlantic. I initially was going to do this as a pair, because that race, you can do it as a solo, you can do it as a team of 2, a 3, 4, or a team of 5. And I thought, right, let me go to a good friend of mine and ask. He was a big kayaker. Hey, would you be interested in rowing across the Atlantic with me? And he turned to me and went, yeah, no. And it was like, well, why not? And he said, yeah, I'm not ready for something like that. And perhaps myself naively, perhaps I wasn't ready, but hey, I'm going to let that stop me. So I thought, well, instead of trying to find another person that would be willing to do it with me, that would fit my character and become a good team, I thought, why not do it as a solo, which adds to the challenge. Like I said, there's more people that have been into space than have rowed across the Atlantic.
It's pretty cool.
And that was sort of where we were about 18 months ago. And since then, I've been trying to pull together sponsorship and support and get everything ready to obviously build a boat, equip a boat, and prepare myself, get all of the race requirements out of the way, because it's obviously it can be a dangerous place. It is a dangerous environment. You throw water into anything, and it may not come out too favourable. But it's a race, and it has to be done safely. So there's a lot that needs to go on, and I'm probably about 180 some odd days away from the actual start. Like I said, it starts in La Gomera in the Canary Islands, and then you row 3,000 nautical miles across to Antigua, making good use of the trade winds. So if you know your ocean currents and prevailing winds, the idea is to try and break out of that North Atlantic turbulent weather, get into a more stable airstream, which is the trade winds, and hopefully, if there's not too many storms, you'll end up in Antigua.
How I'm trying to think of the logistics of this, because you're one man in a boat in the middle of the sea. Like there's a storm. What happens? How do you get through the storm? Do you cover over or stop rowing?
Yeah, so obviously you're right. A lot goes into the preparation before even tackling a storm head on. All the preparation that goes into the race and all the things that are race requirements, from the seaworthiness of the boat and the design of the boat. So it has to be self-righting. So if it capsizes, and there's a good chance that it would get capsized, that it'll pop back up. That you're not going to lose all your equipment when it's upside down. So the preparation into the boat yourself, how you row the boat, how you navigate the boat, all of that is done way before the actual start. So it's a self-sustained race. So you have to be completely self-sufficient. You can't have any material assistance from anyone outside. So you basically start the race, everything that you need to complete the race. That's 90 days worth of food, a water maker that will desalinate the seawater, battery system, solar panels, clothing, food, all those sort of things that will get you safely from one side of the Atlantic to the other. When the race starts, some people would say, well, why start a race just before Christmas? That's not very nice. Well, that is the most favorable period to cross the Atlantic by that route so you don't suffer as many storms. Now, the Atlantic is never still, and that's why it is a challenging race. But it's less likely to be a stormy period because of that. That is basically pre-Atlantic hurricane season. So it's as quiet as it's going to be. The later in the season, obviously, the heat builds up North Africa, and that's where your hurricanes that hit the Caribbean and the southeast United States, because they start over there, they track across the warm seas, they build up, and they become a problem. But that's not to say that you don't get smaller, isolated storms. Again, the weather is going to do what it's going to do, but you're going to be less likely to experience storms, and it changes from year to year. This past year, all the world records were broken, but if you looked at the winds, you looked at the weather, they were very strong winds, but they were all favorable. I mean, they were basically blowing the boats from the Canary Islands to Antigua. So they were dealing with big seas, and they had other issues to deal with air getting into the water systems and people getting bounced around and people splitting heads over them because it was a bumpy ride, but it was a quick ride. Like I said, the world record for a solo crossing previously was 35 days. This past year, the Dutchman that came in, Mark Slatz, he slashed that by 5 days. He came in 30 days. And he was the fourth boat overall. And the three boats in front of him were all four-man teams. And he was literally only hours behind them. So that is a true test of his preparation and how he tackled the race and how he dealt with the weather. Because if you look at the next solo rower after him, came in, I think, in 44 days. He was over 1,000 miles behind him. And they all are rowing in the same boats, and they've got the same number of hours to put time on the oars and so forth. So, yes, you have all the preparation. That's where some may say that the race is won or lost, or a safe and quick crossing is really sort of determined, because obviously an older boat, it's a heavier boat, it's a slower boat, all those sort of things will factor into it. But all things being equal, you have your race plan, your strategy on how hard and how often you're going to row, when you're going to row, when you're going to sleep, all those sort of things come into play. But when it comes down to the weather, that is a little bit sort of strategy and a lot more sort of tactical, because if the weather is blowing you, so you've got trailing seas, that's great because it's getting you to your destination faster. So those are the sort of winds and storms that you want, that are pushing you. If you have a weather system coming head on, and obviously the boats are more affected by the wind than they are the currents. So if you know, because of your weather information, the people that you're speaking to on the phone, that they're saying, okay, there is this storm developing X amount of miles to wherever, to the northeast, to the southwest, whatever, and it's going to hit you in 3 days' time. So you're going to start thinking, okay, in 3 days' time, there is a strong possibility that I might have to deploy my power anchor, which is a big parachute that holds the boat steady in the water. Because obviously when you're in mid-Atlantic, you don't carry enough rope to have a power anchor. And what that's going to do is stop you from getting blown backwards. It's going to hold you in the water. So instead of getting blown back many miles in an hour, you may only get blown back a mile or a smaller distance, and that's why you're going to use it. So you then tackle it, instead of, okay, as a solo rower, I'm going to row 12 hours today, and then in the rest of the time take a rest. You're going to think, right, I know in 3 days' time I'm going to be forced to get inside my cabin and rest, because I'm not going to be able to row during a storm. So the tactics you may employ then is to, right, I'm going to row 18, 20 hours a day, try and make up as much distance as I can until I'm in the storm and I can't make any more forward progress. I'm going to safely deploy my power anchor, tie everything down, batten down the hatches, get inside my cabin, and listen to a podcast like this, perhaps for 2 or 3 days. And when you go back and you look at some of the previous races, it is very much down to the weather and how you choose to pick your route through the weather, and then what you do once you're in weather. And like I said, some boats have elected to go a more southerly route earlier on to get into the trade winds quicker. And then when storms, and sometimes some of these storms are fairly isolated, they only cover a small area of the ocean. Some boats may be affected and they may be stuck on power anchor for 2 or 3 days, when other boats, they may have spent half a day on power anchor, and because the storm has just slightly clipped them, they're back on their oars quicker. And they've then obviously been able to progress. But you don't know whether a storm is going to come to the north of you or to the south of you. Yes, you get a rough idea. It's not like you're in a big power boat and all of a sudden you've got a storm coming at you and think, oh, I'll take a left turn here and go 5 miles to the south. You're in a boat that is traveling, 2 or 3 knots at best. So yes, it is part strategy, a lot tactical, but the bulk of it is all down to sort of the preparation.
So how are you preparing? So how on earth do you train to row 3,000 miles? Obviously row. I know you're
So, well, to be honest, I've not done a lot of rowing in terms of physically just sweating it out, because that's almost like getting sort of trained for a kick in the nuts. I asked, so before I started any sort of training or even contemplating whether this was going to be a good challenge for me, I asked a lot of the previous solo rowers, and also there's a lot of forums and groups that ocean rowers past and present belong to, so you share a lot of information, you ask a lot of questions, you hopefully learn by the sort of mistakes and the top tips from previous ocean rowers, and you try and build that into your own plan. Some of the best advice I got, and this was from a gentleman who won the 2015 race, grew up on the Italian lakes, the family business was building boats, had rowed his entire life, and he said, look, don't spend too much time on a rowing machine or on a piece of flat water, because it won't translate into ocean rowing. And there will be people that will literally row 2 million miles thinking that they're prepared. They get out on the ocean and they suffer real bad seasickness, and they physically can't even get on the oars. Some have developed repetitive type injuries because they've done so much rowing. So they've got injuries that then prevent them from rowing. So his best advice was, yes, learn how to row well and efficient, because that will prevent you from getting injuries. It's because when you, and some other advice from another solo rower, said, when you turn up in La Gomera at the end of the year, make sure you don't have any injuries. That's your ultimate goal. But the preparation between now and then is obviously build yourself up, become resilient, and be comfortable in being uncomfortable. And I love that term. So they've said, do CrossFit type training, do circuit training, do kickboxing, do anything that will put you in an uncomfortable space and obviously builds fitness. Now, on top of that, knowing that you're about to row 3,000 plus miles and you're limited in what you can do, and there's only sort of really one way to row with one set of muscles, and you're going to lose a lot of weight. So trying to build yourself up, because some people will lose, 15, 20 kilos during the crossing. A lot of that, yes, is sort of fat, but there is some muscle wastage and so forth. So the next 6 months is all about becoming an efficient rower. I've got some friends from my Hereford days at Hereford Rowing Club that coach me in that. I've got a local rowing club here that I'm getting top tips. That's kind of the easy part. And And yes, building an endurance on the oars more from a so there's no surprises. And I've already done a 24-hour row with the gym here, which very quickly changed my priorities. Cardiovascular fitness, muscle fitness, I'm okay with now, and I know I'll be ready when the whistle goes. Seat comfort, one of the sort of things that you don't realize when you're sat on your ass that long. After about 40 minutes or so, if you've not got a proper seat and it's set up for you, your ass goes numb, then it becomes painful, and then you can't sit down and you can't row. So now I'm again, or I was a couple of months ago, more focused on seat comfort, construction of the seat, how long can you sit in that seat for any long, what's a good time to stay on the oars before taking a rest, all those sort of things. So again, you've got to experience some of these things before you suddenly realize that, oh yeah, I need to be paying that a little bit more attention than perhaps doing 10 rep deadlifts of 405 pounds, because that's going to soon go. And again, so you've got to figure out what's going to work when and how it's going to play into, like you said, your race strategy.
It's a long time to be on your own. What are you going to do? Obviously, it's weird not talking to someone for that long, I suppose.
So yes, that you've got some pros and cons to doing it as a solo. Like I mentioned, even as a team of two, when one person's rowing, the other person could be resting, or when one person's rowing, the other person could be fixing something on the boat. All those sort of things. And there's always forward momentum, or the oars are in the water doing what they're supposed to be doing. As a solo, you don't get that. So you have to be a little bit more efficient in how you just deal with the day-to-day stuff on the boat, as well as rowing, as well as feeding and sleeping and all the rest of it. You're always going to be able to talk to someone. In today's technology, pick up the phone, we can have a conversation with anyone. And obviously we have redundant systems on the boat. So we've got two phones. I'll be able to take text messages and emails and all that sort of stuff. You can't live stream from the boat, but you've pretty much got everything else to some extent, if you want it. And again, that's part of the trade-off. Do I want a lot of electronics and stereo systems and audio books and cameras and all the rest of it? Well, guess what? That's added weight. There's more battery power. That's all the other. So there's a trade-off in anything. Now, as a solo rower, and I'm looking and focusing on the positives, yes, I am by myself. So there's more work that needs to be done, and I have to do it. But now I can create my own routine. So I haven't got to worry about someone coming on to do their shift 5 minutes late, and that creating perhaps an irritation that after 10, 20, 30, 50 days at sea is going to become perhaps a bigger issue. And I've read a lot of accounts of ocean rowers and the experiences and how the team dynamics have worked out. And I know a lot of other teams, a couple of which that are also supporting the same charity with me in the UK, Combat Stress, that they have a sports psychologist working with them to talk through any little niggles before they go into the race, as well as being at their disposal should they have a falling out at sea. And I've heard accounts where people have been lifelong friends, they've tackled this challenge, and then when they've stepped off the boat in Antigua, have never spoken to each other since.
It's crazy
because they've fallen out with each other. So yes, there is I'm going to anticipate homesickness. I'm going to anticipate missing my family and my kids. Not so much missing other people. Perhaps, like I said, I'm a loner by nature. I'm more of an introvert by nature, and I've got enough stuff going around in my own head to perhaps keep me occupied. Obviously, having a good playlist and perhaps some audiobooks to while away the hours, because there is going to be a certain amount of monotony. You may think, oh yes, you're out on the sea, how beautiful that might be, in the wildlife. Well, yeah, but 3,000 miles worth of ocean, you're in this little 20-foot boat that's going to get lost below the waves. So you're not going to see much around you. And yes, if a whale, a dolphin, a turtle pulls up alongside when the water's calm, it's going to be stunning. And yes, out in the middle of the ocean on a clear night, the stars apparently are phenomenal. You don't get to see a night sky quite spectacular unless you're away from a land that far. But there are obviously going to be a lot of hours of staring at my cabin hatch and the compass and my feet and my knees, and that will have an effect. But that's part of the challenge. So I'm ready for that aspect of it. Like I said, the seat comfort still weighs heavily on my mind.
Quickly, I just want to ask, what are you going to eat?
A lot of food.
Yeah,
So I want to try and add probably about 15, 20 pounds worth of fat and muscle before turning up. So again, I've got reserves. And then that's part of the whole race scenario. I'm probably soon, over the next couple of weeks, going to switch to a keto diet. I don't know much about it, so I'm doing a lot of research on that at the moment. I've got some other nutritionists that are advising me on that stuff, because the winner of this past race, and a number of the other competitors in there were using a modified keto diet because the amount of calories that you're using is phenomenal. The winner of the solo race, because the hours that he was putting in, he said he was consuming around 10,000 calories a day. And he felt that it probably should have been more because he still lost weight. And that was just to sustain his level of output, which was phenomenal, don't get me wrong. The 4 oarsmen that won, they were on a modified keto diet. They used regular sort of freeze-dried rations and complemented that with, again, MCT oils and coconut oils and nuts and all the other sort of things that are high fat, because it became a cleaner burning fuel. So if you are into the sort of diet and nutritional side of things, so it provides a steady stream of energy that's more efficient for this type of endurance activity. And if you even now look at these ultra marathoners, they've switched to that sort of diet, and you go to an ultra marathon running course and you'll see the skins of avocados all over the place, because instead of like an energy gel, which is pure glucose, they're using high fat type foods. So like I said, I know at the moment I know enough about it to be dangerous and peaked in terms of interest. But the other interesting piece of that type of diet used in this way is that your quality of sleep increases. So you need less of it, and it improves kind of brain function or cognitive function. So you're less likely to be that sort of zombie, sleep-deprived individual. There's still going to be a lot of that, but it's evidence has shown it's not as bad, which will mean you're less likely to make mistakes or have to go and rest more often, which again stops you from getting to your destination quicker. So that's the next part of the preparation, is to sort of refine the diet and the meal plan, because one of the race requirements is you have to have 90 days worth of food with you, and you have to submit a calorific burn plan. So you have to say, right, I'm 225 pounds, I'm going to consume 7,500 calories a day, and when you get out to La Gomera, you have to lay out all of your food in front of the boat, as well as all your other safety equipment, and everything has to get checked off. So they're going to go through and they're going to check through all of the rations to make sure that you've got 90 days worth of 7,500 calories. Of that, again, that's a big lump of food, and most of that, or 80% of that, has to be getting more efficient. So it's freeze dried. So whatever menus you choose, it's freeze dried because that reduces the bulk, and obviously it reduces the weight. So you can literally get an 800, 1,000 calorie meal in the size of your fist. But then when you add water to it, obviously it's going to bulk up, because water adds the most weight, which is why you have a water maker. In fact, you have 2 water makers on board the boat that's going to provide you with your fresh water each day. And then that's sort of how you plan around that. So everything's built for safety. The other 20% of your food has to be meals ready to eat. So it won't require rehydration. And that, again, is because, let's say you've broken all your oars, you've called for assistance, but it takes 2 or 3 days, maybe even 2 or 3 weeks to get safety to you, or a ship to come rescue you, which is very unlikely in the Atlantic. It's a busy place. You have 30 days worth of fresh water as ballast in the boat, which are all sealed. You can't break one of those seals unless you're in a...
I lost Tim for a couple of seconds here, but I think the general gist was you can't open it unless you're in a really bad situation.
Or you're going to get a time penalty. So that, again, stops people from drinking all the fresh water, making the boat nice and light, which then makes it unstable, or again, gaming the system in any way. Everything is there for safety. The food is up to you, but you've got to make sure that you've got enough to get over. Now, I said 90 days. Like, my plan is to try and cross in 50 days or less. So why take extra 40 days worth of food? Because we don't know what the weather's going to do. So it would be poor planning if you got sort of 49 days into the race and you still have 20, 30 days to go and you're now out of food. So 90 days is a nice, safe margin. That's not to say that you can't eat more, or when you know that you're getting close to the end, that you can't start dumping food overboard, but you have to retain all of your wrappers. So you're not going to litter the world, of course. So just at the start, everything gets checked off, and then at the end, everything gets checked off to make sure that you haven't dumped anything overboard, to lighten the load. Everything's checked in, everything's checked out, including each and every wrapper. So the only thing that you should have consumed that's on that boat is basically the food.
That's pretty cool. Right, so for those that want to see more about the challenge, it's Tame the Kraken, isn't it? So they can find you on Facebook, Instagram.
So my campaign is called tamethekraken.org. So simple www. Tame the Kraken, all one word, KRAKEN.org. Go to the website. You'll see all the backstory, kind of why I called the boat the Kraken and why Tame the Kraken, and you'll see the story as kind of, that's my analogy of dealing with mental health issues and so forth. So the idea is that the Kraken is your mental health issue, whatever that may be, and we're trying to tame that Kraken. Obviously, the Kraken, for those that don't know, a mythical Nordic sea creature that had a tendency to drag whole ships down to the bottom of the sea and so forth. So that's the website. You can follow us on Instagram at Tame the Kraken. Twitter is Row Atlantic, and Facebook, which is probably the most active, is Row the Atlantic and Tame the Kraken. Or if you just type in Tame the Kraken, it pops up.
Or I'll link everything in the blog post as well. So
please do.
Guys check that out. Now I've got 3 questions to fire at you. So the first one is, what is success to you and how do you achieve it?
So I knew you were going to ask these sort of questions, and I've sat here while I've been bumping my gums thinking of the most appropriate answer. I still ask that of myself today. What does success mean? And some days I have to admit that I still struggle with it. And anyone looking at from a certain viewpoint, yes, I am. I've got a roof over my head. I've got a loving family, money in the bank, and life is good. But I'm never one that's going to settle, I don't think. I'm always going to be looking for what can I do? And it's probably more about impact, having a positive impact on the world around me. And that I'm still trying to figure out. Obviously, I want to be a good father and have a positive impact on my kids. And I think we do a pretty good job. But I still strive to be better. I think success for me is less about having a bank full of money and have some big lofty title. I think it's more about, again, being comfortable in who I am and the people that are around me, and have a positive impact on them. And I would say that perhaps this rowing challenge is perhaps that in its extreme. Trying to influence more people, and there are days where I struggle with it, if I'm being honest. That am I up to the challenge? Can I get to where I need to be and have that positive impact on those people that I'm trying to influence, or hope to influence, should I say? But if it was easy, then I would guess everybody would do it. And it's all about, again, walking that path and keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep working towards that end goal. And for me, that goal always moves. And as long as I'm improving the lives of those around me, for me, I guess that's success.
That's pretty, I like that. So I think we've covered quite a few examples in this, but how have you overcome adversity? What's a example that stands out to you?
I've got many. If we were to go back to, I think, my military days when I was actually on sort of the aptitude test, we had got beasted one morning, just some corrective training because of that was sort of be expected. And I picked up an injury. I ruptured the bursa in my hip and pulled a load of muscles in my back. And that was the morning of the 20-mile march. And we jump on the 4-ton truck and spend an hour going out to the start line. And obviously they're not comfortable vehicles, and carrying an injury like that, I get off the vehicle and could hardly walk. I was in a lot of pain. But started the 20-mile march, and I think I got into about 3 miles into the march, and I was like Quasimodo. I was dragging my leg behind me in a lot of pain. And I got inside my head, because it is an individual march, so there's no one around you. People are passing you, you're passing people. And I got to the point that the pain was so much that I needed to sit down. And when I sat down, I started to talk myself out of it. And I think that was the lowest point in my career, thinking I'm not going to be able to do it. Physically, I'm not going to be able to do it. And it was at that point, a guy that was in the same unit as me came past, older guy, more senior guy. And he said, no, I can't. At least get to the next checkpoint. Get there, and I'm sure the training staff will have some painkillers for you. You'll be okay. And off he went, off into the distance. And it was kind of that next 2, 3, maybe 5 minutes of contemplation and listening to his words say, just go on, just get to the next checkpoint, was what carried me through. I sort of had a word with myself, stood back up, grabbed my burger and threw that on, and continued to walk to the next checkpoint, very much like Quasimodo, and just dragging my leg behind me. Got there, and obviously I'm losing a lot of time. And even though I felt that I was perhaps going to fail the march because of time, I just kept those words in mind. Just get to the next checkpoint. Just get to the next checkpoint. So when I got there, I got the painkillers that I'd been promised, and that was enough then to get me going again. And I did come in under time, and I did pass it. I then went on to have 3 months worth of physiotherapy before I started the course. And I think that is just, a lot of people have said it, that you just got to keep going. Like if you take quotes from Winston Churchill, I think it was, that says, "You're in hell, just keep going." You've just got to keep going. Whether you use the analogy of Nemo and just keep swimming, or just keep walking, just put one foot in front of the other. I think that when there isn't a clear answer or option, just keep moving, and then options and an answer will perhaps present itself. So I think that is probably how I've overcome adversities in the past, is that, okay, I think when I've come close to failure or not done as well, it's because I've got lost in my head. You try to think your way out of situations. And from my background in the situations I've been in, it perhaps been a little bit more brute strength, and you can literally just put one foot in front of the other. But if I look at my business career to some extent, when it's been easy to perhaps give up, just write another email, put another proposal together, knock on a few more doors, and it's always come good.
I think that's great advice. Come in handy in the row, isn't it?
Yeah. Just keep rowing.
Yeah. Right. The final question I had is, who is a person that you look up to, and why?
Yeah, I'm still struggling with this one, because again, there's been different people in different parts of my life. Even though he probably wouldn't believe so. In my early childhood, I looked up to my brother, and he motivated me. There are people that have led like sporting teams, rugby teams that I've been in, that I've looked up to and I've learned from. I would say that I would idolize them, but I've seen what they've done well, and tried to emulate them, whether that's someone in my own life, my own team, or whether that's been elsewhere. And then there's someone that sort of stands out in my early SF career, who was my team leader at the time, who just exuded professionalism from every pore. And I've come across him a couple of times since then. So if I was to pick one person, it would be him, because he, to me, personified the special forces soldier, and was professional from the moment he woke up. He probably even slept professionally, in the sense that he looked the part, he was fit, he had a sense of humor, he was a thinker. He just did everything that was right. And he, like I said, he was a great sort of teacher. I would say I probably learned more from him in the 2 years that I served with him and under him in that team, than I perhaps did over the next 5-10 years of my career. Just he was just in that sense. So he's not someone that I would necessarily name, because I know he's still in the industry, and I probably wouldn't like that I then named him. But yes, he's the individual that I would pick as being the motivator, because you just wanted to get up earlier and do things better and to a higher standard to get anywhere closer to him. I wouldn't say you wouldn't even get close to him, but like I said, he was just that good. And I know that he lives overseas now, and he's got a very successful consultancy or business himself. So I had no doubt that he would go on to great things when leaving the service himself.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that, Tim. It's been very interesting. I will put all the links to everything on the blog, so make sure you check that out, and visit Tame the Kraken. You can sponsor. There's a donations page, isn't there? Whether you a small donation or corporate one, is a wide range.
Yeah, there's a PayPal and a GoFundMe links on the site. And yes, you can obviously donate to the actual campaign, as in getting me and the boat to the start line. And depending on how much you want to commit, we'll work with you and maybe even get your name or logo on the boat. And obviously the bigger sponsors will work with you to make sure that you get some shared benefit in that. And then obviously you can support the charities that we're supporting. In the UK, we're supporting Combat Stress. Obviously they're one of the longest and well-known charities when it comes to veteran or military mental health stuff. They do a lot for the community. And on this side of the pond, we work with an organisation called Connect. They're still very much in the embryonic stage, but the idea behind that is that they're going to connect several veteran charities and provide basically the help that people are willing to give and marry it with those that need the help. So it's through a phone app, and there are organizations as well as other charities that are all getting more involved with that. So the idea behind the support coming from Tame the Kraken will help fund the further development and the setting up and running of that facility that will hopefully become a game changer in knitting a number of organizations together to help many.
Brilliant. Right. Thank you very much, Tim. And make sure you check out Tame the Kraken. Everybody else. All right. Cheers, Tim.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.
So that was podcast number 7. Thanks for listening. If you can help in any way with Tim's project, please visit Tame the Kraken. I've linked the Facebook page and website in the blog post. Our next podcast is with Premiership Rugby's Guy Thompson. We're going to find out how he got to where he is, training and motivation and stuff like that. So hopefully that'll be a good listen. So stay tuned. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter at breakingthenorm.blog. It'll take maximum 2 minutes to read on a Monday morning. It's got a link to our latest podcast, some positive news stories, and book recommendations and things like that. So subscribe at breakingthenorm.blog.